All right, it is 6 o'clock, and we do have a quorum, so we'll go ahead and begin with the item number 2, which is the citizens desiring to address the board. Sandy, do we have anybody that's asked to speak to the board? Thank you. Item number 3 would be the chancellor's report. Dr. Wallace.
Thank you. To say it has been a busy legislative session would be the understatement of the year. The final day for filing bills showed a record-setting 8,136 bills were filed this session. And I have to admit that it feels like all 8,000 are in higher ed, because we've had such a dramatic session between our commission work and other things that it's been really busy. First and foremost, I remind the board that House Bill 1 and Senate Bill 1 were introduced early as the budget for the state, and within each of those budgets was the $650 million required for the recommendations from the Community College Finance Commission that need to be implemented. Now, saying that, House Bill 8 and Senate Bill 2539 have been introduced and filed, and their companion bills for the new funding structure. So in the first time in the history of most of us have ever thought of, the money was there before the policy was. It's usually the reverse. We usually try to find the policy and then say, okay, how are we going to fund it? So that's a really exciting time for community colleges in the state. And I'll be honest with you, both have been met through hearings with absolutely zero opposition. In fact, we've garnered support from several key organizations in the state: Texas Manufacturing Associations, Texas Business Associations, Commit Texas, several that have come in and testified without anyone asking them to about their impression with this particular bill, and the fact that they're very excited about the new formulas or the new funding entity. So that's exciting. The Colkhorst bill, Senator Colkhorst out of the Hill Country area, she's out of Brenham, is regarding nursing clinical sites, and it's being met with quite a bit of opposition from for-profit colleges and universities. In this bill, the state funding for higher education nursing programs will be given priority for clinical sites over those paying for their sites. What we've run into with several hospitals across the state, in fact 33 of the 50 colleges in the state have had issues with for-profit organizations coming in and under the table paying for clinical sites, taking them away from the community colleges in the state. And so this bill would end that. And of course, Diane New, our Dean of Health Sciences, is with us tonight, would be the first one to say that's a great news, because it's really affecting our ability to clinically prepare our students. So we've been very supportive and appreciate her work on that bill. Carla and I were in, and Mr. Hay and Dick, Carla and I were all in Austin for some meetings last week to some last-minute things, and then she and I kind of were able to run through the building the next day and meet and greet, and we got a 5-minute come to Senator Colkhorst's office, and so we ran over there to give some information, and so I appreciate that from our staff helping to support that. There are some bills that would have negative effect on NCTC, and I have to bring those up to do my due diligence. The first Senate bill, 1799 by Senator Springer, will end the ability for a college, and only two-year colleges, universities were not included, to offer a contract of employment for over 1 year. That would eliminate any multi-year contracts across the state, including multi-year faculty, staff, and all the CEOs in the state would have to remove themselves from the normal 3, and in fact we have several of our state colleges offer their presidents a 5-year contract now. There's about 7 or 8 of those, and those would end. The concern we have is we have in the past, through our faculty senate and through instruction, looked at the possibility for a high-performing faculty to go on a multi-year contract. This would now negate the ability to be able to do that in the future. We don't have tenure, so it doesn't affect that, but it does affect 1/3 of the state's colleges have tenure, 1/3 have multi-year contracts, and 1/3 have yearly contracts. The irony was it only included the 2-year. It did not include the universities who have multi-year tenure and their CEOs are on 3+ year contracts. There are several other bills that would end tenure. In addition, there are bills that would increase the responsibility of you as board members in hiring staff and faculty and taking the responsibility away from the CEO solely. There are several bills that include the approval would be required by the board to hire assistant deans, chairs, vice chancellors, and the chancellor themselves. And this could increase the length or number of meetings required by boards during a given year. You might have to get where you have to meet twice a month rather than once a month to just go through the numbers of new positions. Most of the boards that we've spoken to are not in favor of that. Their adage is we hire a CEO to do that work, and that's the job they're supposed to do, and if we don't like it, we'll fire them. And so that's something we're working on to see if we can clarify. Thirdly, and perhaps what I'm most gravely concerned about by the numbers of the bills that are going to expand Texas State Technical Colleges into areas in which there are already robust programs offered by community colleges. One of those bills introduced is Senate Bill 1442, Senate Bill 1442 by Senator Springer, and it would bring a TSTC to Denton County, directly impacting our colleges' campuses already delivering those programs. Now, theoretically, they are disallowed from delivering that which we already offer, but as many of us who have worked with TSTC in our other previous positions, Dr. Miller and myself, know that often the programs entered to in an area are not the ones they ultimately offer. They tend to expand once they've arrived, and they tend to duplicate once they've arrived. It is also worth noting that the cost in state appropriations on average at a Texas State Technical College is $9,400 per student to be educated by TSTC, and they're requesting on top of that an additional $750 million in endowment for facilities, as the state builds their campuses but does not build ours. NCTC currently on average receives only $1,290 per student in state support. As a point of bragging, our health sciences have been ranked the best in Texas in 2022 by Intelligent, that looks at over 2,900 colleges and universities, while TSTC West Texas ADN program has been placed on conditional status for 2022 and is currently not accredited by either ASIN or CCNE. I'm not attempting to downplay the importance of TSTC in respective areas of service, but I am here to defend the hard work of our staff and faculty, and to go on the record that Denton County does not need Texas State Technical College. Finally, there are numerous bills as it relates to the work of equity, diversity, and inclusion. This list of bills ranges from the elimination of EDI departments to the negative employment outcomes of faculty and staff who cross certain predetermined lines based around sex, race, and religion. There's far more to come, and it's too complicated right now to know where these are going to land. There is also an expansion bill by Senator Springer that would allow community colleges to offer baccalaureate degrees in education. However, it appears at this point that it has been met with much pushback, and I'm not really convinced that that is going to see itself past the committee. The universities have been very concerned about that. I have in front of me 139 pages of higher ed bills related to the community colleges in this state, and I can't begin to dive into each of these. I've only highlighted what I believe are the most impactful to NCTC at this point. But if you have any questions about any of these or any others that you've heard or anything you have, I'm open to those questions now. But we've got some work to do before the final end of legislation session. Questions or comments or anything I can?
Okay, better? Yeah. I'd like to comment and acknowledge Dr. Wallace's efforts in Austin on behalf of all of the community colleges, but especially NCTC. It changes every 5 minutes. You'll be over here and somebody says, well, oh, that's going to be heard over here, and then you're running to that committee staff to try to make sure that everything is understood. So it's a huge educational process, and it's being met with others that are selling their view of the subject. So I'd just like to say thanks to Dr. Wallace on behalf of everybody, our board for sure. for the efforts that you put forth in Austin to protect our interests and ultimately continue the good work that we do as community colleges across the state. So, thank you. You have to wear tennis shoes that day. Right. You're through with your report? Okay, very good. All right, the informative reports, the first one would be the Executive Committee, and we did not meet last month. Finance Committee.
We discussed the upcoming tuition fee and room and board for the next school term. The committee accepted the administration's request not to change any of those fees. We also discussed a resolution in support of the relocation of the Young County Appraisal District's offices, which we will get to later in the meeting. We spent considerable time discussing the maintenance tax notes. We discussed the upcoming resolution and the flexibility of the funding structure about our repayment options. Then we reviewed the normal reports, the second quarter investment report, January financials, February financials.
Okay, the next item would be from the Building and IT Committee or report, and I don't believe they are here, and nor have they met. Okay, thank you. All right, Dr. Miller, the finance report.
Make sure this is on. You have in your packet monthly financials for both months of January and for February. And there's just a couple of items that I wanted to call to your attention. I mentioned at our last meeting that we were going to we're going to see a change on the investment report. So if you look at either January, February, or even the quarterly investment report, you'll notice there is a new section on there now toward the end on the second page of each investment report, and that is now entitled Investment in U.S. Government Securities. This has been added to reflect the portion of our board reserves that are now invested in T-bills and Treasury notes. So we still have CDs, but we have some of it in these U.S. securities as well. The second thing that I wanted to call to your attention, if you will look on the February financials, on the third page of the February financials, the page is entitled Transfer of Funds. Had an issue brought up at Finance Committee, and it was a very valid question. If you look at the 3 months of this quarter, December, January, and February, you see that in February there's been a drastic increase in the transfer of funds over those previous 2 months. And as I reported to the Finance Committee, that happens every year in February, and it happens because of the disbursement of Pell Grant dollars. They come into us from the federal government. We transfer those funds out to the students. So the 2 months of the year is hit: September for the fall tuition and February for the spring tuition. So that's the reason for the significant increase there. Nothing to be alarmed about. Are there any additional questions anyone may have about the financials?
I think we asked all of our questions at the Finance Committee.
That's okay. That's okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. The next item on our agenda, number 5, is the consent agenda. There is A through a D. Are there any of those that anyone would like to take independently? Okay. Then I would accept a motion to approve the consent agenda items. So I have a motion by Mr. Hayne. Do we have a second? Okay. Second by Jerry. Additional discussion? Mr. Henderson, thank you. Additional discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye and raising your right hand. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. The next item is under discussion and possible action on A, the consideration of a resolution to support the Young County Appraisal District. Dr. Wallace, are you going to?
This evening will be the Dr. Miller show.
Oh, sorry.
He has every agenda item in the so go, man.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Young County Appraisal District is responsible for collecting our taxes for the branch campus maintenance tax in Graham ISD. And as one of the taxing entities that's supported by the appraisal district, they are coming to us asking for our support in their efforts to relocate their current offices in Graham. They're actually moving across the street into a larger facility that will provide them with room to grow. They have a buyer for the old facility, and they plan to enter a purchase agreement with owner financing for the new location. In order to complete the move, they need letters of support from 75% of the taxing entities that they serve. So they have come to us, and the administration is recommending approval of the attached resolution in support of the relocation of Young County Appraisal District offices in the city of Graham.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have a motion to approve? Motion by Christie Morris, second. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Hand. Additional discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye and raising your right hand. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. All right, the next item would be the consideration of setting tuition and fees for the upcoming 23-24 academic year. Dr. Miller.
Thank you. Last year, we raised tuition and fees for the first time in 3 years. The general use fee was actually what we increased. We increased it $5 per semester hour for all students. For many years now, we've been monitoring our tuition rates and looking at how competitive we are with neighboring community colleges. And we've been doing everything in our power to keep tuition affordable for our students. Currently, we rank very close to the statewide average in in-district tuition, but we remain quite high in out-of-district tuition. $105 per hour for in-district ranks us at 19th highest of the 50 community colleges. $195 per hour for out-of-district ranks us 6th highest in the state. So this year, the administration is recommending that tuition and fees for credit hour instruction be maintained at the current levels. You have those levels in front of you. Essentially, the main ones are 105 in district, 195 out of district. Although it was not originally included in your board materials, we would also like to seek your approval to set tuition for continuing education classes as well. And I want to read directly from a communication received from Dean Sarah Flushy about these fees. I quote, "With the anticipation of current education offerings that these offerings will increase at NCTC, the CE division is developing a more streamlined approach to registration and payment for these courses. In the past, there's been a very cumbersome formula for tuition calculation. We're proposing one set amount for both in-district and out-of-district students for workforce classes and courses with non-credit occupational skills awards. This amount does not include tuition for enrichment, Ed2Go, CDL, contract training, and other third-party education providers. We're proposing tuition be set at $100 per semester hour or $16 per contact hour." So what I would like you to consider is amending the recommended motion that has been provided for you. And now I would like this recommended motion to be: the administration recommends the adoption of tuition and fee rates for fiscal year 2023-24 as presented, as well as adoption of a flat $100 per semester hour charge for continuing ed classes.
So just as a point of where we are is in the funding mechanism for the state as well, I remind you that CE will be included in the future as a part of our funding and completion, especially OSAs, Occupational Skills Awards. This aligns us where that's going to be easier tracked. We've got a lot of work to do on the CBM reporting to the state in order to get those funds. And then with dual credit and the dual credit per hour, that will also be under revision perhaps as we find out about the free and reduced lunch monies that may come as a result of socio and economically disadvantaged students being funded in a new way through both the state new funds, and also there is added conversation about TEOG. So all these things are where we are right now, and that's part of the reason we'd like to hold flat, because we need to see what those new monies coming in are going to look like, where they will align themselves, and hopefully it may mean that we can drive costs down a little further for students, or at least maintain flat rates, if that makes sense.
All right, so we would need the motion as presented by Dr. Miller, and I'm going to try to read this to make sure I get it right. The administration recommends the adoption of the tuition and fee rates for 2023-2024 as presented, as well as $100 per CE hour. Per semester hour, thank you, for continuing ed. Okay, okay, so I can make the motion, then I'm going to do that. Okay, second by Mr. Hand. Second by Mr. Hand. Any additional discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye and raise your right hand. Aye. Opposed, motion carried. Thank you. All right, so the next item would be the consideration of this setting the residence hall and meal plan rate for 23-24. Dr. Miller.
Okay. Last year, we raised room and board rates by $50 total per semester. Like tuition, this was our first increase for several years, and due to that recent increase, the administration is recommending residence hall room and meal rates remain at current levels for the next school year.
All right, so we'd need a motion to approve that. Okay, Mr. Henderson made the motion. Do I have a second? Second by Ms. Morris. Additional discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye and raising your right hand. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. All right, the next one would be consideration of all matters incident and related to the issuance of the sale of the North Texas Community College District tax notes, Series 2023, including the adoption of the resolution authorizing the issuance of such notes.
All right. For several months now, the Finance Committee and I have been working very closely with our financial advisors at Specialized Public Finance about the possibility of issuing maintenance tax notes to provide funds to upgrade some of the older facilities here on the Gainesville campus. Last month, we came before you outlining possibilities, and we asked our advisors to proceed with identifying financial institutions that might be interested in assisting with the issuance of these notes. As a reminder, maintenance tax notes are very limited in their uses. They must be used for the rehabilitation of existing facilities and cannot be used for new construction or expansion of existing facilities. Once they've been issued, the college has a tremendous amount of flexibility in using any income stream to fund the related note payments. We can use M&O funds, we can use INS funds, but we have that flexibility each and every year to determine how we're going to pay the notes back. Over the past couple of months, we've looked at anywhere from $2 million to $5 million worth of potential projects for the maintenance tax issuance. The selected projects that you see in front of you have been vetted by legal counsel to ensure that they're legitimate uses of this type of funding. Last week, bids were solicited for $2.5 million of rehab projects covering a variety of improvements, primarily HVAC, roofing, plumbing, and ADA compliance. I'm now going to call on Mr. Paul Jason of Specialized Public Finance to please come forward and go through the process of selecting our financial partner for this venture and to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. Paul Jason with Specialized Public Finance. Good to see everybody again. We're here tonight. I've got, looks like everybody's got hard copies as well of the presentation. I'll start with page 1. Thank you. There we go. So like Dr. Miller mentioned, he was very helpful in this process. We sent out bids to banks a couple weeks prior to the bid date. The bid date was the 23rd. We received 4 bids. Told Dr. Miller we were sweating it a little bit. Thankfully, you have good credit, and a lot of banks were interested in lending to you. There's been a lot of turmoil and uncertainty in the banking sector. We've seen a lot of volatility, especially in the short end of the lending curve. So proceeds from the notes, once we close, will generate just over $2.5 million. Regents Bank was the winning bidder. They're out of Birmingham, Alabama. They have a really active local government lending branch in Dallas. That's the folks bid out of Dallas. Regents Commercial Equipment Finance is that official arm, but it's Regents Bank, as we all know. Their bid was 3.57%. All these bids that we show, JP Morgan Chase bid multiple call features, but we wanted to stress the flexibility that Dr. Miller went over with the Finance Committee, that these will be callable after May 1st of 2024. So essentially 1 year you can call these, meaning you can prepay them if you choose to do so. And like Dr. Miller mentioned, you can use any legal source to pay these notes and when you go through your budget process. Closing is set for April 24th. So tonight this board has before them a resolution authorizing the issuance of the notes. And then between now and the 27th, we'll work with your bond attorney and we'll go through the Attorney General process, and these will be considered a valid debt obligation. Funds will be available on the 27th. Okay. All right. So here's a list of banks that we sent to. These are roughly 50 banks that have expressed interest on bidding on local government transactions. We start with your local entities if there's a relationship that exists, and then we'll work our way out all the way to some big national banks as well. This is a summary of the bids. Regents Bank with the 357. Most of the fees were fairly comparable. You can see their bid was really aggressive compared to the other bids that came in with KeyBank and Amegy and then JP Morgan. JP Morgan bid multiple different call features. The only rate that was lower than the 1-year call from Regents was a 7-year deal, meaning it wouldn't be callable for 7 years, and I don't think that's the desire of this board. A lot of numbers, we apologize for this, but this basically shows the structure of this transaction and how we got to the level debt service. This is a 10-year amortization. You could go out 20 years, so this is pretty rapid pay down of debt for the project. So we look at your existing tax base. We feel 8% for next year is probably pretty conservative considering what you achieved this past year. And then it's level debt service of roughly around $310 million. And then you can see the rate of 3.57%. Next page is the sources and uses. The legal par amount of the note would be $2.545 million, would generate proceeds of $2,502,000, and then the $42,500, that's cost of issuance for all the parties involved, bank counsel, attorney general, our fee, your attorney. Those are everybody involved in the transaction to complete it. Unless there's any questions, I'm happy to recommend that we would award the tax note $2,545,000 to Regents Commercial Equipment Finance, LLC.
Just as a couple of just notes, I think that it's interesting to consider for the first time in quite a while, the investments of the board are now in a larger percentage than the money. You might mention that, Dr. Miller, please.
Yes, I told Dr. Wallace I wanted to go look today at this, and the number was very interesting. These notes, we're going to be paying 3.57% interest. I went and looked today. Our bank account where we keep board reserves is currently paying 4.57% interest. So if anyone has a question about the wisdom of borrowing money, why to pull money out of earning 4.5% interest when you can use 3.5% interest monies? So it's very fortuitous. You know, it's a good time with that spread because we haven't been earning. a year ago, we were getting 0.5% interest on those bank accounts. So this was a very favorable interest rate that we received from this particular bank.
And although, just as a public reminder, these are projects for only the Gainesville campus. It's just verifying that. We're not, that's the only location in which you can use these funds.
Exactly.
Projects simultaneous, Robbie, or whatever we, no. I said, that's a pretty big list.
You have a couple of years in which you can expend the money, and that's what we're going off of.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be spent within the first year. Now, I think you're not going to be healthy by waiting 3-4 years by any stretch, but the list you have is what we've gone through in our maintenance staff, Jack and Robbie and others, to say within the 2-year period these can be accomplished, but it would take a little while.
And many of them are projects that would be contracted out to another
right,
party
right.
anyway. The
You'd have
roofing,
to,
our guys don't typically do
that.
roofs and things like that.
Okay. Yeah, good. So he's looking forward to this, I'm sure. Good. Well, it's definitely things that need to be resolved and fixed here on our campus, Gainesville campus, so thanks for investing in investigating and bringing this option to us, because quite frankly, none of us were, or I was not aware that these were available to us, so it's awesome. Thank you. Any additional questions or anything before I accept a motion for this approval? Okay, so I would accept a motion if someone would like to make one. Okay, Ms. Morris made it. How about a second? Second by Mr. Henderson. Additional discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye and raising your right hand. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, the next item is item number 7, I believe it is, executive session, and we do not have a reason to hold executive session this evening. Okay. And then item 7, number 8 would be to discuss any action after that. There aren't any. And the last item here would, prior to adjournment, is announcements.
Yes, and so we just remind everyone and our board, early voting for the Board of Regents elections begins on April 24th, my birthday, that's fun, through May 2nd, 2023, and it will be at the Gainesville Civic Center. So early voting, April 24th through May 2 at the Gainesville Civic Center. I want to just say how much I appreciate the work of Sandy Otto. This is a cumbersome activity. Elections are complicated. They're not what they used to be. There's a lot of legal to it. She's been working with our county in a diligent way, and our county elections officer, so I appreciate her work, and she probably deserves a free coffee or something at least at the end of this.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on our agenda is adjournment. Mr. Hand moves we adjourn. Second. Mr. Henderson, thank you very much for your attendance this evening. We appreciate it.